Well, thank you very much, Mr. Rahill and Dr. Young, members of the board. Thank you for having me here this evening. Appreciate being here in Benicia. It's a beautiful day out here. It's a little bit warmer in Sacramento, where I'm coming from. So if you could give me a hand advancing the slides, that'd be great. All right. As Mr. Rahill said, I'm Matt Petler. I'm Vice President with School Facility Consultants. We're a K-12 facility planning and funding firm located in Sacramento. We're located in Sacramento. We found that's always the best place to be because that's where the money comes from. But we work with districts throughout the state and many districts in the Bay Area. We've been in business a long time, since 1986, and I've been with the firm since 1998. We really got into this business when the state got really involved in school facilities after Prop 13, and the state started passing school bonds to fund and help provide funding for school facilities. Over the years, we've worked with many districts and helped many districts secure billions of dollars in funding for their school facilities. So where we are with state funding right now is that we had a dry period for quite some time. As I mentioned, state bond funds are the primary way that the state works with local school districts in a partnership. State has bonds, and then you pass bonds as you have in your district. But the last bond that we had prior to November of last year was in 2006. And so that was a long time. Typically, we had bonds every 4 years. And so we've got a lot of pent-up demand. We're excited about the election, and it was great, but we've got some projects we need to work through, and it's really important that now that the bond has passed, that districts work quickly to get in line for funding. So Proposition 51 was the bond that passed in November of 16. It's a $9 billion bond, and $7 billion of that is for K-12. $2 billion of it is for community college. And there's 4 areas of the program. The major funding go to new construction projects and modernization projects that Mr. Rahill mentioned. And then there's some funding for other programs like career tech education at high schools. As I mentioned, it was quite some time in between bonds, so districts continued to submit applications even though the state didn't have money. And so these charts show that there's projects that are waiting in line and are waiting for the state to activate and process for funding. The bad news is that there's projects in line. The good news is you can tell from those pie charts there's still quite a bit of dark blue, which is the money that is still available for new projects coming in. And so as I mentioned, I think that it's important to activate as quickly as you can, but there's still opportunity at the state, both in the new construction and the modernization programs. So just real quick, what new construction, what does that mean? And what does modernization mean? They aren't really terms that we use locally in school districts. New construction basically means that you're adding capacity to your district. You're adding new classrooms, you're building new facilities, adding square footage. The one area, though, that also covers is replacing portable classrooms. So in many districts, and I think maybe the case in your district, you may have some older portable buildings that you need to replace. New construction is a funding source that you can use for that. Modernization, again, it's really a state-contrived term. It's renovation, anything from, roofing. I know you guys have done some technology upgrades. You've done some, or are planning some field improvements, things like that. Anything to renovate your school, of course, improve the educational delivery in the school and the adequacy of the facility, all the way through also replacement. So again, going back to portables as an example, you could use either new construction or modernization funding to replace portables and buildings. And we'd work with Tim and your staff to figure out the best way to maximize your funding. The programs are calculation driven. So the way that this works is that there's a whole bunch of rules and data that we collect and analysis that we do, and then we're reliant on state calculations to determine what your entitlement is. So the first step is what the state calls eligibility. That's an entitlement program calculation driven. New construction, that calculation is what the state says your enrollment growth is going to be compared to what the state says your capacity is going to be. And that delta in number of students is what the state says you need in terms of new student capacity. And that becomes a bank that you draw on once you move projects forward. It's district-wide. The state splits it up by your grade groupings, but it's a district-wide calculation. Modernization is site-specific, and it's driven by the age of the facilities on the campus. So permanent buildings become eligible when they're 25, and portable buildings become eligible when they're 20. And then the state also looks at your enrollment to make sure that, if you've got a low enrollment at a site, that they aren't, providing you maybe what they say is money you don't need for that campus because your enrollment is a little bit lower than your capacity. New construction, we got to look moving forward. So anytime you've got a project, prior to occupying that project, we've got to file an application to the state. Modernization, however, is reimbursable. And so, as we've talked about and meeting with Dr. Young and Tim, a lot of the projects that you've done, recently with Measure S, we're going to look to those once we calculate the eligibility to see if there's opportunity for reimbursement. And then that will reimburse your local bond funds, and I'll move forward to other projects and be able to stretch and do more with your local dollars. So the first step in this process, and really I think what we're working with the district on to get started, is to calculate that eligibility. So what is your new construction eligibility entitlement? What is that bank? Same on the modernization side. And once we calculate that, then we get together and we say, okay, how do we get in line as fast as possible? And how do we maximize that funding that we can go after under those programs? So we've got to determine that eligibility. Once that's established, then what I call your meal ticket to actually get in line with an application to the state is you've got to have the Division of State Architect approval on a set of plans, and the Department of Education has to also approve those plans. And there's a whole bunch of other paperwork and data analysis that we do, but those are the meal tickets. So then the next goal is, once you know the eligibility, is okay, let's target those dates, or let's go back and find ones that are already DSA approved and match that up and get in line for funding. There are a couple other programs Tim mentioned. We'll be looking at others as well, but a couple other big programs. I mentioned Career Tech Education. That's to build new career tech facilities at comprehensive high schools, or renovate facilities for career tech at comprehensive high schools. It works differently. It's not a calculation entitlement driven program. It's really led by your career tech educational program, and the state scores it based on what you're doing, how you're linked to the business community in that area, partners, success rates, those types of things. And then they score that application and they fund you based on a project that you're doing, a capital project that you're doing to support those efforts. And then they cap how much money they'll give you. All these programs are match programs. So that's why really having your local bond in place is important. Modernization, the state provides 60 and they match 40. New construction and career tech are 50-50. There's a couple other programs up there. There's money for seismic if you've got a seismic vulnerability. There's money if you have another health and safety issue that comes up unanticipated. There's programs where the state will participate in those things. There's others. There's some child care programs, and there's things that come up that we always keep an eye on and work with the district on as they come up. The first step is eligibility. The second step is getting in line, and then the question is when do you get money? The state sells bonds typically twice a year. So just like you sell your bonds to fund your projects, the state goes out and they sell their Prop 51 K-12 school facility bonds to fund their share of projects. But they only do that twice a year. And the amount that they do is a little bit up in the air. And so I think some of the materials in your packet, and one of the things that is a challenge is the cash flow. And when will we get this money? So the other piece of that is that we've got projects in line already. And so once you have eligibility and then you get in line, the state funds in date order. And so we've got to wait for those bond sales, and we also have this list to clear in terms of getting to projects that are newly submitted. So it is a challenge, but I think it's important to note that, as I mentioned, we didn't have state bonds for a period of time, and we were in an if mode, if we're going to get funding. Now we're in a when mode, and that's a huge step. So we know that we can get you in line and you're within the state's authority. They've got enough money, and then the only question is when you're going to get that money, and that's something that we'd work through with Tim in particular in the business office on cash flow and making sure that we're doing the best we can to estimate when you'll get your money so you plan your projects accordingly. So this, I think, was in your board packet. So this is kind of, this is a spreadsheet that we've put together to help from a planning point of view. It also has a political element to it because, of course, we're pushing the state to do things faster. So this is if they kind of carried on how they were doing things before, when projects would get funding. Basically, it's 2 to 2.5 years from when you submit your application to the state. If they continue with how they did things before, again, we're pushing to have things go faster. The governor may be working, at least while he's still in office, for the next year and a half or so to do things more slowly. But that's going to be a constant discussion, constant struggle. District staff, district boards are engaging with their elected to try to speed things up. We're doing that. But again, I want to emphasize we're in this when mode, not if mode. So the fight is give us our money now because we're ready, as opposed to, hey, let's pass a bond, let's have some money at the state. So that's kind of what I put together for you guys. Would love to answer any questions if any came up for me. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. I think the timing's great. And so the first step is to determine your eligibility. And to do that, we're probably looking at, 6 to 8 weeks to get that done. And then what we would do is we'd sit down with the district staff and we say, okay, here's the eligibility. And then we get going on projects right away. What I'm hoping is that we can find eligibility for some of the projects you've already completed, in which case we'll turn an application around right away. We'll have to go through some state, Department of Education will have to do a quick review on the project, but then, it should be, another, maybe 6 to 8 weeks to actually get an application in line. So, we're hopeful in the next, 90 days or so, to really be able to be in a place where we can start submitting applications. Absolutely, right? And the state doesn't judge, hey, we like this project and what it's doing better than this project. For modernization, it's an entitlement. And so what we're going to do is we say, hey, Site A has this much money. Let's find the fastest way to grab that money. And we do that through applications, but it can be multiple applications. Absolutely. With new construction and modernization, it's not first come, first serve because you have to have entitlement, right? So that's the gatekeeper. But once you have entitlement, then the state funds the projects in date order. Career tech education is a little different. That, as I mentioned, they're looking at your ed program, they're scoring you. They rank and it's competitive from the application review from that point of view, and the scoring, the higher scores, get priority for funding. But modernization and new construction is a calculation entitlement program. Absolutely. They're completely separate. And on modernization, you may have eligibility at one site and not at another site because it's stovepipe site by site. And so that's why it's really important to do that eligibility step first. What's the universe? And then what's the fastest, most, biggest bang for your buck way to go after that money? So you look at the campus, and any buildings that are 25 years old are eligible, and any buildings that are 20 years old are eligible. Then the state looks at, did you access funding before? Because that kind of resets the date on the buildings. And then that spits out a number, the state calls it pupil grants, that is going to be a subset of your enrollment. It can never be higher than your site's enrollment. And then that dollar amount, that number of pupils is multiplied by a state dollar amount. And they give you a state dollar amount per pupil. There are other things that you can get. For example, if your site's really small, they'll give you a bump because construction may be more expensive. If you're located way out in the middle of nowhere in Imperial County, they say, well, because it's going to cost more because you can't get contractors out there. So it's that sort of thing. And then you have that pot of money, and then we say, okay, well, let's look at projects, and we look at the dollar value of those projects, and they've got to align. So there's a rule that says you have to have a certain amount of construction costs in a project you're actually doing to go for a certain amount of money. So if you had, $5 million of eligibility at a site and you were only doing $500,000 worth of work, the state says you can't get all $5 million, just for the $500,000 worth of work. They have a test to make sure that the construction is significant. Mm-hmm. If the Yes, correct. And on the ground for you, it can be one project. So you don't have to split up your plans or your bids to accommodate multiple applications. We can submit multiple applications on one project. And so in that example, if you're adding capacity and you're also renovating, then we would look to new construction to the add capacity, and we'd look to modernization for the renovation. If you're replacing portables, let's say, and you're renovating, we may sit down and say, well, what's the best way to tackle that one? Maybe we use new construction on the portable replacement because we have got enough renovation work to use all the modernization. But we can have we could have a career tech application on the same set of plans, potentially. So the state, in my world, we see applications, but that doesn't affect your ability to move forward with the most effective way to deliver your project on the ground.
Am I right in that piece that it was a safety?
I mentioned the facility hardship program. There is, it's a pretty high bar, though, in terms of what constitutes qualifying for that program. The state uses the term imminent health and safety threat. So it's really like a structural deficiency.
Imminent would mean
where you've got to, right, and you got to take kids out of buildings and that sort of thing. The other, safety-ish program is seismic. So that's the roof's not going to collapse today, but if there's an earthquake, it is. And so there's programs for that. But we've done safety for, we've had sewer issues, or we've had water issues, things like that. So you can access that program, but it's not uneven pavement and things like that.
How about mold?
Whoa. Yes.
That was loud.
Yeah. Mold is one. There's a specific type of mold that is determined to be the very dangerous mold. So you have to have the environmental hygienists go out and do the study and that sort of thing, but mold is one of those areas.
How about fire alarm systems? So that falls in that category where you're a non-working or a troubled old panel that's now 100% replaced?
Absolutely. The piece that we have to watch out for there is code upgrade requirements versus a failing system.
Failing systems.
Right, failing systems. Right. We
work
with, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Obviously, we work with a district where they had water inundation issues, and that affected their electrical and their fire alarm. So that was something where where the fire alarm was non-functional, not because it wasn't up to code or, old in that sense, but it literally couldn't work because they had issues around it.
Now, is there? I'm assuming there's a cost to all this.
There is, yeah. So we've proposed to work with the district on a time and materials basis. We figured that that's really the best and most fair way to do it. So we've got in the proposal we presented to district staff an hourly rate schedule. We basically work at your request. What we also tend to do is give not to exceed estimates for chunks of the work so that we all kind of stay on the same page there. The not to exceed that we proposed was $20,000 for the eligibility work. And again, that would be hourly, and that would be a cap. So if we were able to get it done under that, then then we would work to do that. We do the best we can to estimate that. Some of it depends on when we get into the work, every district's different, and you know what data we can get and what the state has already and that sort of thing.
And is there a cost on the applications, or that's all part of
There would be additional costs on the applications. And again, it depends on how many applications we're doing.
And that's all at T&M, or is that?
Typically, it's all at T&M. Yeah, we're very flexible if there's a desire for another structure, but we found that really tends to work the best.
Any other questions? Any questions from? Oh, go ahead.
I have one more question. So maybe this is also for you, Tim, but I'm curious, as someone sort of new to this, how if we did get money for previous projects, that would pay down the previous bond, right? And yeah, and I'm curious how that might impact us financially, or what that would look like.
So if we were to get some state funds for modernization to reimburse us for stuff that's already done, it would be additional monies into the district. And we could then work with our facility master plan committee to prioritize another project. So it wouldn't pay down a bond liability. It would be a way for us to acquire more money from the state so that we could do more projects.
I see. Okay.
So in our master facility, we have almost $150 million of work that needs to be done, but we only have a $50 million bond. So that will allow more money to be used in the priority 2 categories, and let's start moving into that area.
I say,
Basically adding more money. Got it.
Yeah, I say, unfortunately, I've never met a district that has more money than facility.
Okay, no other questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you for
thank you
having
very
me. I
much.
very much appreciate it.
Appreciate your information.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, hold on a second here. This time we're moving to action items. 8.1. We're going to close our board meeting. We're going to open up a public hearing regarding our solar project findings. Ms. Egan, you want to?
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for making time to be here today. I'm just going to introduce this project for today, and then we have Elliot Feldman with Sage Solar Consultants who's going to come up and give you some more information. So this is a return to the solar project, which looking at the history, we acquired 3 bids from 3 vendors. 2 of them were shortlisted and interviewed, and we've looked at the different scenarios and information, and I'm going to have Elliot come up and share the discussion with you.
Okay. I'll like wink and nudge. Okay. Just nudge. Got it. Great. Well, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us for this special board meeting. So as Roxanne kind of mentioned, the purpose of this presentation is to give you an update on the RFP phase and an overview of some of the project costs and savings for the proposer that we deem to be the best value to the district, and that's Borrego Solar. So here's a quick overview of the agenda for the items that we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you updated project costs reflective of the pricing from Borrego Solar. I'll outline what that means in terms of our funding sources and how that we can pay for the project, as well as updated 25-year project savings and cash flows. I'll go into a little bit detail about the next steps are if you'd like to move forward with this project. And if you're interested and if we have time, I have more information about Borrego as well as information about how we put together a proposal analysis. So I'm happy to kind of talk to that in more detail if you'd like. Great. So here is an overview of the updated project costs from our lowest bidder and best value proposer, Borrego Solar. So I just want to quickly point out these project costs reflect solar being installed at Benicia High School, Robert Semple Elementary, Matthew Turner, and Joe Henderson. And as a reminder, Benicia High School is sized to also offset Mary Farmer. So we've got solar going in at 4 sites, but offsetting 5 schools. So based on the proposal that we received, we believe that the engineering, procurement, and construction costs from Borrego would be about $4.6 million. Per the direction of the board at a previous meeting, we've included a 10% construction contingency, as well as a soft cost allowance, and the soft cost worked out to about 8.5%. I believe there was maybe some questions about what was part of the soft cost, so I've gone ahead and itemized everything there for you below. You're welcome, yeah. And I won't go in too much detail, but I did want to point out the utility interconnection fee it's actually not a cost, it's a contingency. But what this is when you go ahead and go to hook up your solar with the grid, sometimes there can be unexpected infrastructure upgrade costs, and we're really sensitive to that. That would be things like upgrading switchgear, and you're probably familiar with that. So we don't expect you to come across this. We've taken a look at your electrical infrastructure. Things look pretty good. But again, we're being conservative, and we've put in a 3% contingency for you here. So overall, if you were to go with Borrego Solar, the total project cost would be $5.4 million. Now talking a little bit more detail about the funding. So as a reminder, we've already secured $3 million in a 0.0% CEC loan. That's great. I believe I've talked about the clean renewable energy bonds. Those would make up the majority of the balance for this project. We've been working with the district's financial advisors, and we've zeroed in that the Krebs all-in interest rate would be 2%. So I just want to point out it's slightly higher than what we did with our original modeling of 1.25%, but we've updated that in our project savings and cash flow analysis for 2%. Lastly, we were able to find a little bit of Prop 39 grant money that can be applied towards this solar project. So that's great. So we've got about $57,000 coming in from that. So through those 3 funding sources, we meet our total funding need of $5.4 million.
And the Prop 39 money is money we already have secured?
Yeah, so you're already eligible for that.
We're already eligible, so that's something we still have to apply for.
You have the planning funds. You already have it, basically. It's the easiest way. Mm-hmm.
That is about $900,000. Yeah, and then the way that just as a quick review on the Prop 39, you have to maximize energy efficiency expenditures first, and that was that plan that Ms. Egan talked about with the HVAC and all that stuff. And so with that plan, our estimate was about roughly $50,000+ that we could put towards the solar.
Okay. I didn't know if it was another process.
Yeah.
That plan, subsequent to the board approval, was submitted to the state, and we just, like a day or two ago, got approval. So,
Great. So now to kind of talk about your potential project savings, I would like to quickly point out there's 2 scenarios at play here, and I think we've covered this, but just to go as a reminder, there is a deadline within PG&E for the end of this year to meet the time of use grandfathering rates. Meeting this deadline is going to be much more financially advantageous to the district. So assuming that the deadlines are met, and I want to point out all the vendors, and especially Borrego, have guaranteed they can meet this end of the year deadline. We've reviewed their project schedule. We feel it's tight, but it's absolutely doable. So we are under the assumption that they can meet the full construction.
What does a guarantee mean?
Guarantee is, it's written out. We have it in writing. We're also going to be proposing liquidated damages if they don't meet that. So that would be part of our leverage to hold them to it. That would be how we would recoup some cost if they do not meet the end of the year deadline, though. Yeah.
And then they're guaranteeing us that they will have everything installed, in place, up and running.
There's a technical point that we need to reach to get the deadline, and it's sign off from the inspector of record. So it doesn't have to be fully operational by 12/31, but it needs to be substantially complete. And so that's what they are saying they can meet in their proposal, and liquidated damages would come into effect if they do not meet that requirement. So again, if we meet this time of use deadline, 25-year estimated savings in nominal dollars is $7.5 million. Again, if we don't meet this deadline, the savings are reduced down to 5.2. But there's kind of a caveat here. In the 5.2 is really a worst case scenario. And I say that because that would assume all 4 sites don't meet the deadline, which would be we don't think that's going to happen. And so again, it's a little bit of a worst case scenario there, because that would assume, we could prioritize that the high school would be met so that we get those savings there, because that's where the majority of the money is coming from. Here is an updated cumulative project cash flow. So this is looking at all the sites. I just want to point out that the way that we've financed it with the CEC money and the CREBs, we are cash flow positive at year 1 throughout the project combined. So that is definitely a positive. Keep going. Thank you. So let me stop. Is there any questions that I've got for the financial parts of this?
Can you go back to the other slide again?
Sure.
So when you say we're going to be cash flow positive, does that mean that the minute we begin this process and it's time to start paying these bonds back, that the project itself is going to be paying for it and it's not going to be impacting the budget?
Yeah, after year 1, your energy savings will be greater than your costs to facilitate the project.
Okay. And I think just an aside, because we had this discussion a little bit ago, we were just having a facility meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that, Tim, would be to our advantage to continue to reiterate is this is not bond money. This is going to be Prop 39 and a CREB loan, and so that we're clear that we're not doing that.
Not point for bond, exactly, yeah.
I seem to recall in our original estimates, we had 1 year we were cash flow negative.
Mm-hmm.
And how did we magically not have that year now?
Absolutely. So, and if we go to that cash flow table real quick. So what I want to point out is this is all the sites together. So your Benicia High School is subsidizing some of the smaller schools that take a little bit longer to become cash flow positive, but your overall savings are still there. So if you think about it as a portfolio of a project, overall, you still are cash flow positive. The 3 elementary schools. Yeah, exactly.
I have another question.
Sure,
if you might.
absolutely.
Okay.
No.
So my understanding with the solar equipment is also that there is a lifespan on this equipment. So we're in this grid that you're giving us of this money. Are we going to be able to assume that cost? Because my understanding is, and I'm not sure which the pieces are because I'm not really good at this, but that, thank you, the converter will go in about 10 years and need to be replaced.
Yeah, so that's absolutely
so
right.
what's the cost to that? And
so we have factored in all of your operational costs.
Okay.
Inverters are warranted for 10 years. They're usually going to last about 12. I was actually just talking with the district earlier. They have one that's lasted 15 years. That's on the high side of things. But what we've done is allocate that at year 10, you're going to have to replace all of your inverters. That's not really true because it's not like they're going to start going on the fritz at year 10. It's going to be a little bit staggered. But we've banked in the amount that you're going to have to pay after your inverter warranty is up at year 10. To your point a little bit more, it's modeled for a 25-year cash flow because that's the warranty for a solar system. It's 25 years. So you are warranted your panels, everything for 25 years. You probably will still be operational after that. 27, 28 years is totally normal for a solar system's lifespan.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great. So that was an overview of the financials. In terms of next steps, what we're looking for, if the board would like to move forward with this project, we're looking for you to grant approval so that we can enter into contract negotiations with Borrego Solar. Sage, as well as the district's lawyer, will be representing the district in the contract review negotiations, ensuring that everything is up to spec and meets the various stakeholders' desires. Simultaneous to that, I'll be working on the bond issuance. That's going to be a priority for us because we want to get that money in as quickly as possible. The thing that we do have in our favor is it's going through private placement, which is actually a little bit quicker. So there's kind of two things. So if you grant us approval to move forward, then we can start the contract negotiation process, and then the bonds issuance. And if everything looks good, we would have design and permitting starting next month. Borrego Solar has actually already offered to do some of that work at risk to help expedite the project moving forward. Yeah, Borrego, so they're willing to do some of the design and permitting work at risk prior to the contract being fully executed. They want to show they're committed to the project as well as help expedite it and meet that end of the year timeline. Yeah. The remaining slides are details about Borrego Solar and also about how we put together a proposal analysis. Would you like me to step through those? Do you have time?
I think that information it was provided also at the last school board meeting too, and it's just more detailed information than what Elliot just described. I'd like just to, if there are more questions, that's great, but basically we're asking you tonight to approve a $5.4 million solar project for all of our schools, and that $5.4 million would not be funded by the bond, but we're going to fund that differently. We're going to fund that separately with 0% California Energy Commission loan and a 2% energy bond, and then a little bit of Prop 39 money. So no bond monies to fund this $5.4 million solar project, which over 25 years would save us, according to this package, about between 5.3 million on the low end to 7.6 million on the high end, depending on if we meet those grandfather timelines.
Thank you. I guess I have one more question. And I know this has come up before when we've talked with you, but and I know it sounds like you guys have done a great job of sort of incorporating into your model potential costs along the way for maintenance. But I'm curious about any potential, just in your experience, unforeseen costs that aren't included in this.
Yeah.
I mean, would be my major concern in terms of
absolutely. So we at Sage try to be as conservative as possible for that reason. What's great about you all is that you have been very conservative. The 10% contingency is an extra measure that a lot of districts don't take. The 3% utility interconnection contingency, that's another one that we've added. It's hard to say that we haven't put enough dollar amount as a contingency. I feel like we really do have that covered. Does that answer your question, or is there any other unforeseen things that you're looking for example of? Or?
No. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
I'm deferring to you as the expert in terms of, the solar world and what potentially happens with equipment and stuff. But
yeah, so the solar market today is fully established. 25-year warranty, 10-year warranty on inverters. Maybe 15 years ago, you didn't have those timelines. So you're pretty covered there. Obviously, solar's pretty readily seen, especially in California. So there's it's a pretty mature market nowadays. So from a technology standpoint, there's no real risk of it not working per se. You also could pay a little bit more for a longer warranty. It's not necessarily worth it, but there are other hedges against things not working out as well as you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
My one other question is, in the market, the solar market a few years ago, there was not enough solar panels available, and has that been remedied at this point so that we really can meet the timeline?
Yeah, so it's a great question talking about procurement. That obviously going into the summer months, there's going to be a lot of construction, especially at schools. Borrego Solar and all the proposers guaranteed that they had the capacity to procure. So that's from a cash flow standpoint, they can buy it, but also they have the connections with their suppliers to get the material on site at an appropriate time.
We met with Borrego
right
a little while ago, and so we came in, and it's assuming that we contract with Borrego today, if you guys give that action, their timeline is they have a client, a school district going off their schedule, and Benicia coming on. So their timeline was very in line with taking on this job for us.
Mm-hmm. They're ready. Yeah, we have other jobs with them right now. We definitely think they are a quality, top tier solar vendor.
So my question is more for Tim on this one, and then I have a second question, which is, what is this going to look like? We're talking shade structures in the parking lot, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
There are.
Yeah, we got little pictures here, but we see a big picture up there. Tim, our last board meeting, we were kind of confused about why all the other schools were added. So when you look at his slide on page 8, when you look at the kilowatt usage, that's the difference, and that's why you would do the entire package, correct? The high school really is the bulk of all the kilowatts that we're going to take advantage of, correct?
I know that our high school is our biggest energy user.
Right.
Can you?
Yeah, so the high school is the largest system size. It's the largest user and corresponds with the biggest solar array to offset that. The other schools are still designed to offset their full electrical usage, but they are comparatively much smaller.
Right.
And I can kind of show you a couple pictures that maybe help understand that. So right there, that's Benicia High School, and these are the designs updated from Borrego Solar. They look pretty similar to what we've all discussed and the stakeholders have said these are the locations to work in. Something nice to point out, Borrego didn't need to use any of that front area. So no trees would need to be trimmed, no interference with student parking in the front area or anything like that. So that's great. If we can maybe skip to the next slide, please. Thank you. So it's much more zoomed in, but you can see there's just 2 arrays here at Matthew Turner versus I think we have maybe close to 10 at Benicia High School. So much smaller usage corresponding to a much smaller solar PV system. And then you asked what it would look like if you maybe skip through a couple more, please. One more. Awesome. So kind of what we've been showing you all along. This is from Borrego. These are their arrays, about 12 foot on the low end, maybe 16 foot on the high end solar shade structure going in parking lots or over, playground areas in certain schools. It's going to be on your south side parking lot.
Oh, I'm sorry. It doesn't want to stay on. Henderson is actually going to be in the play area.
It
correct?
Is. Yeah. So that would be providing shade for the students in their lunch on a hot day. Students really seem to enjoy that. Yeah. Oh, just one thing before I forget. Borrego also offered to put together an educational component at no cost. So all students will receive basically a kind of a coursework related to solar and what's being installed at their schools, and that could be integrated into your broader, math, STEM courses, or however the district sees fit. Yeah.
Before we get any further into Borrego and the funding and stuff, we are on the public hearing on the fund and the findings and how we want to do the project. So if we have nothing else on that, I'm going to close our public hearing and going to reopen our board meeting. And then we're going to move to 8.2, which we could discuss all the other things that we've been discussing. And right, and it's also a resolution on 8.2. Those of you with computers have the resolution in front of you. I'm still in Charles here. So is there any other questions on the funding of going with Borrego? Thank you. What we're going to be saving, our anticipated costs or anything like that? Okay, so do we have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the energy services solar contract as presented.
I will second.
And that is actually resolution number 16-17-16. And we have a first and a second. And so with that, roll call vote, please.
Trustee Ferrucci,
Yes.
Trustee Holguin,
Yes.
Trustee Monette,
Yes.
President Wing.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank you.
it's been a
Very
pleasure to work
helpful.
with you all, and hopefully we can deliver you a great project.
Yeah, thank you. This was a great, this is really helpful.
Good, thank you. You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah, I want to also chime in and say thank you because I was one of the people that was most vocal at the last board meeting because I was very lost with the compactness of the report. So this was great and I really appreciated it. So thank you.
You can blame our principal, Tom.
Okay,
He just
I will.
got back from vacation. He wasn't prepared. No, I'm just
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I think you said that we'd be able to begin construction in June.
We're probably a little bit later than that. 'Cause
Okay.
We do have to go through the full, DSA permitting process.
Which goes much quicker for these, I think. Hopefully.
Yeah, we're going to try to get it done as quickly as possible. I think a late summer, early fall hitting construction is
Okay.
probably what we'd be looking at.
How long does it take to complete the construction, would you think?
I really wish I had the project schedule in front of me. Some of the smaller sites, 1-2 months, kind of in that window. And we're talking about the actual putting it up. Obviously, there's punch lists and things that would carry it on. Benicia High School will probably take a little bit longer, but it also depends on what the vendor can do in terms of resources. They will actively be looking at their schedule, and since they have said that we're going to hit that deadline, if they need to put more man hours to it, I think they definitely are capable of doing that.
Pretty good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to adjourn our meeting. Thank you.